I was doing deliveries for Uber up until a few months ago. I had my car already back then, so I used it. I see some people doing it on their bikes, but to me that seems too dangerous. I didn't love the job, because it was tough to make good money, but it did allow me to work on my own schedule. I got a remote sales job recently, and that's why I don't do it anymore. Anyway, I had one scary incident in the roughly 6 months that I did the job. I took an order from McDonald's one night at around 11 p.m. The destination was one of the more dangerous parts of town. I had made deliveries there before, and it's usually no big deal. I wouldn't leave my car parked there overnight, but a 5-minute stop was usually fine. Not this time, though. As I drove to the area, I noticed that the streets were empty, and the buildings were old. As I approached my destination, I noticed that it was an old apartment building as well. I went inside and walked right into the building. It seemed like the electronic lock on the door was broken, and anybody could just walk right in. The smell of old carpet lingered in the air as I made my way to the 3rd floor. The woman who answered the door was friendly enough. She thanked me for bringing her food, and then I walked back to my car. It was late by then, probably 11:30 or something. When I walked out of the building, I saw my car 50 or 60 feet down the street. I could see that there were 2 men standing right beside the driver's side door. It was tough to tell for sure, but I thought they were trying to break into it. I almost yelled to scare them away, but I thought better of it. I didn't know if these guys were dangerous. Also, there were 2 of them, and only 1 of me. I hid behind the building, and pulled out my phone to start recording. I could tell that one of them had some kind of a tool, and he seemed to be prying at one of the doors. The other guy was just standing there, keeping watch. The street was so dark that I could barely make out their faces. The only light came from a nearby street lamp. It was just enough to see the logo on one of the guy's hats. Suddenly they turned their attention towards me. I was spotted. I slipped back behind the corner and started backing away, but I could hear them coming after me.
"Give us the phone, man,"
one of the guys shouted at me.
"We'll mess you up if you don't."
I kept backing away. "F off," I yelled back. "I've got you on camera, and I'm calling the cops." Then they rounded the corner and kept coming. I still had my camera out filming. I shouted that the footage was already backed up to the cloud, so they were screwed. That was a lie. I never set up that whole thing, but they didn't know that. The 2 men hesitated for a moment, before turning around and running off down the street. I waited a few seconds to make sure they were gone, before going back to my car. The lock on the driver's side was broken, but luckily they didn't seem to get in, and nothing was missing. Not that I had anything valuable anyway. My guess is that they were trying to steal the whole car. My car was a little old, and I think it would not have been that hard to start for someone who knows how to steal cars. I was pretty freaked out for the rest of the night. I decided to stop working after that, and called the police instead of doing any more work. I gave them the footage of the guys. They were quickly identified. In fact, the officer who I spoke with recognized one of the men right away. They were arrested, but only charged with a misdemeanor. I think that's wrong, because one of them threatened me. The way they approached me was really scary too. I have no doubt that I would have been messed up pretty bad if I didn't pull my camera out. Those guys were really dangerous. I did pizza delivery when I was younger. It was actually pretty decent money for a college student. This story is about a really scary and confusing thing that happened to me when I was working. On this particular night, I was out on a delivery to a house in the countryside. The order was for 3 large pepperoni pizzas and 2 2-liter bottles of Coke. It was just another delivery, like I had done many times before. I was following my GPS, even though I was pretty sure I knew the way. It was just one long road in the country. When I arrived at the house, I saw that it was large and isolated, with a long gravel driveway. I drove up and stopped in front. As I walked to the door, I could hear dogs barking inside. I rang the doorbell, and a man answered. He was tall and had a stern look on his face. "Can I help you?" he asked. "I have a pizza delivery," I replied, holding up the boxes. The man looked at me skeptically. "I didn't order anything," he said. I was confused and checked the address on the receipt. It matched his house. "Are you sure?" I asked. The man assured me that he didn't order and that nobody else lived at the address. He took a look at my phone and confirmed that it was the address. He seemed understanding, but he closed the door and I was left standing on the porch. I walked back to my car and called the number associated with the order. Someone answered and confirmed that the address was correct. I was really confused. I didn't want to go back up to that house again because I thought the man would get angry. It may even count as trespassing or something. I decided to head back to the shop and tell my boss what happened. The order was prepaid, so prank orders were basically non-existent. I pulled out of the driveway and started driving back. I looked in my rearview mirror and saw a car close behind me. It was red, and there was a single person driving. It was too dark to make out much else. I tried to let him pass, but he wouldn't go. The car was really on my tail. I kept driving, but he stayed right behind me. I still wasn't that scared, because some people just drive like jerks. It isn't that rare. A few miles later, I looked up ahead and saw a man standing in the middle of the road. He was waving his arms frantically, as if he wanted to get my attention. I didn't know what to do. Should I stop and see what he wants, or keep driving? I slowed my car, the other car still behind me. I didn't know what would happen if I stopped, and I didn't want to find out. Then I noticed the car behind me started to speed up. It was pretty much on my bumper. In fact, I think it even made contact with my car, but I wasn't sure at the time if I was imagining it. I knew I had to act fast, so I swerved off the road onto the shoulder, narrowly missing the man in the road. I was still driving really slowly, maybe 20 miles per hour, but I made it past the man. I heard the screech of brakes as the car behind me came to a stop. I looked back and saw the man in the road get into the other car. Then it turned around and sped away. I couldn't believe what just happened. I was grateful to be alive, but also confused. I didn't know what to do next, so I called the police. I tried to explain it to them, but I know I wasn't making much sense. I was really frantic, and I'm sure I was babbling. They told me it was probably just a misunderstanding, and I accepted that at the time, but looking back, I know that more was going on. I finished my shift that night and went home. I checked my car and noticed a dent in my back bumper that I'm pretty sure came from that other car. My car was silver, and there were traces of red paint in the dent. The other car was red. In my opinion, I fell into some kind of trap and just barely made it out. Unfortunately, the police did not take it seriously enough to investigate. I'm sure the order was placed by some kind of prepaid card anyway. Probably would have been impossible to trace. I guess I can take some comfort in the fact that those jerks wasted a few bucks on pizza that they never even got. I used to do food deliveries for one of the apps. For privacy reasons, I won't say which one. One day I took an order for Chipotle. It was just for 2 burrito bowls. Pretty standard order. I arrived at the location and walked in the front door. The restaurant was busy, but I found my way to the pickup counter quickly. I showed my order information to the staff, and they handed me the order. It was ready to go. As I walked back to my car, I could feel the warmth of the food radiating through the bag. It was making me hungry. I thought I might stop off there on my way home. I checked the delivery address and put it into my GPS. It was just a few miles away, in a quiet neighborhood that I was familiar with. I arrived at the customer's house and rang the doorbell. After a few moments, the door opened, and I was greeted by a man, probably in his mid-30s. He had an angry look on his face, and he didn't seem too pleased to see me. I didn't know what his problem was, but I also didn't care. I just wanted to drop it off and leave. "Delivery for Sebastian," I said. The man nodded and took it from me. He didn't say anything, and then he closed the door. I thought he was rude, but I shrugged it off and started walking back to my car. Just as I was getting into the driver's seat, I heard a loud voice shouting behind me.
Hey, come back here.
It was the man that I just delivered the food to. He was standing at his front door holding the bag. I got out of the car and walked back to the house, wondering what could be wrong. When I got there, the man was fuming.
What's this?
He yelled, thrusting the bag towards me.
I ordered 3 burrito bowls, not 2.
I didn't know how to respond, because I have nothing to do with what is in the order. All I do is pick it up and drop it off. If there's something missing, then that's between the customer and the restaurant. In fact, I could get in trouble if I even opened the bag, so it was really none of my concern if an item was missing. I told him that, but he wasn't having it. He started getting aggressive, shouting and cursing at me. I didn't back down though. I knew I had done nothing wrong, and I had proof of the order. Things quickly escalated. The man was getting in my face, and I didn't appreciate it. I'm ashamed to say that I was in his face too. The man shoved me, and I shoved him back. Not my finest hour, but I was really angry by then. Before I knew it, we were in a full-blown fight. The man was throwing punches, and I was throwing a few as well. Luckily, none of them really landed, mine or his. Eventually, I came to my senses and ran away. The man was still shouting and cursing, but I didn't look back. I just got into my car and drove away. The next few days were tense. I was worried the man would try to come after me, or maybe the police would get involved. But nothing happened. The man didn't call the police. I didn't report it either, because although the man was the aggressor, I was still worried that I would get fired for fighting with a customer. I really just wanted to put it all behind me and move on. The man did report the order as not delivered though. I just ate the cost, because I didn't want to get into it with him. It wasn't worth it. This may not be a typical horror story, but it was definitely horrible. It was a Friday afternoon, and I was working from home. I was consumed with my work, and I didn't want to leave my house, so I decided to order food from a local restaurant that I'd never tried before. I scrolled through the menu on Uber Eats. The Philly cheesesteak sandwich caught my eye. It had everything I loved, so I placed my order and went back to work. About 20 minutes later, I heard a knock at my door. I eagerly opened it and took my order from the delivery guy. The smell was great, and I was really hungry. The bread was fresh and crispy, and the meat was tender and juicy. I took a big bite, and it was pretty good. I ate the entire thing in record time. But a few hours later, I started feeling really sick. At first it was just a slight stomach ache, but then it got worse. I felt like I was going to throw up, and my head was pounding. I tried to drink water and rest, but nothing seemed to help. I won't gross you out with too many of the details, but if you've ever had food poisoning, you know what it was like. The sickness persisted for the entire weekend, and I was miserable. I was almost certain that it was the sandwich that caused it. On Monday, I decided to call the restaurant and complain. I explained the situation and asked if there had been any other complaints. The person on the phone denied responsibility and told me that they had a strict hygiene policy in place. They suggested that maybe I had caught a stomach virus or food poisoning from somewhere else. I wasn't convinced, but I didn't want to argue, so I let it go. I was back to normal soon enough anyway. Horrible as it was, I moved on, but obviously, I didn't order from that place again. A month passed, and I'd almost forgotten about it. That was until I saw an article about the restaurant, linked on Facebook. I clicked it and read. The restaurant that I had ordered from had been shut down due to unsanitary conditions. The health inspector had found rats and other vermin on the premises, and the kitchen was filthy. The article mentioned that the restaurant had a history of health code violations, and it had been warned several times. The same restaurant that had denied any wrongdoing had been shut down for the very thing that I complained about. I felt angry and disgusted. I had trusted that restaurant with my health, and they let me down. I couldn't help but wonder how many other people had gotten sick from their food. I felt like I dodged a bullet by not getting seriously ill.